All right. So I'll give the floor to Rieki now. Take it away, Rieki.
Yes, just had to find that unmute button. Hi, everyone. How was the sessions, the course? Was it just right? Too much? Not enough information? Like, how do you feel? Like,
good. A lot of information. A lot of information. Good.
Awesome. Maybe we can that when new folks join it automatically. That one? It'll get a little weird.
And can everybody mute themselves, please? Thank you.
Dropping in for myself, I started a fast at the beginning of the summer solstice. And it just kind of unlocked a lot of weird stuff for me. So I'm kind of coming out of this like cocoon kind of collapsed depressive state. And I think a lot of that's kind of feeling the weight of everything that's going on in the world right now. And typically I focus more on just doing, and I kind of feel like maybe I'm doing a reasonable job of blocking it out, but every now and again, I just have to go into that really deep, weird, uncomfortable, gross, chaotic place for a little while. So I'm right at the potentially the boundary of coming out of that. So that's a little bit of the energy I'm bringing with me today. However, I'm looking at all the beautiful questions that everyone has, and I realized, part of my intention was to dive into this with a little bit more of, what drives me, why I decided to show up and kind of dedicate all of my time towards building this. But then the other part of my brain looks at all of these questions that are very practical and tangible, and it's the nerdy part of me that I'd love to answer. So I'm going to try to do a balance of both. And I want to leave a lot of time left over for questions. I really prefer that. So please keep getting them in whilst I'm kind of doing a little bit of a share. I'm not going to do any presentation because that's boring. So I won't put you through that. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube. If anyone wants to continue learning about everything that Seeds is about, you can listen to me talk for many hours. So I'm not going to do that to you today. Seeds to me it's a progression of going through periods like I just did these last couple of weeks of constantly trying to just realign with what's the best way that I could show up. Being part of this, we're calling it a regenerative renaissance, but this transition period where I think humanity's got all the cards kind of stacked against us. And we have this opportunity to build a different type of civilization to raise our families in. That's a big drive for me. You guys probably are okay with this. I've done a couple of like past life regressions, and every time I attempt to do that, I end up having a conversation with my future daughter. And she keeps sharing with me like some of the ways that I can, continue to show up and prepare a world that's worthy for her to be part of. And it's kind of guided me in a lot of weird places. First, it was intentional communities and permaculture, because it's, if we could create our own little island of regeneration, we can block off the rest of the world and we're going to be okay, right? And I realized I was kind of an isolationist drive, but I dove into that for a while anyway. And what I learned during that time was groups, how to get groups to come together and play. And even playing, like if we're just playing together, how do we play together? Like not even how do we work together, not how do we get each other to do things we don't like doing, but like how do we actually come together and do things we do like doing, which is actually pretty surprisingly a difficult challenge. So, and that's what you see with most, projects that are intentional communities. Their biggest hurdles are usually how to collaborate and create together. So about 7 years ago, 10 years actually now, is when I started getting into intentional communities and all that. Part of that story involves, never mind, that's a long story. Why am I telling you this? Yeah, I'm going to keep telling you this story because I think it's valuable. So after intentional communities, and that didn't really go very well, it kept evolving. It kept going through these periods of trying to re-dive in and say, what's the most useful thing I could do? Next was how to organize communities. So it was all about, collective governance, value. How do we quantify value? How do you, use discomfort, and how do you use conflict in communities as a source of growth? And how do you rewire that perspective of conflict being bad, something we need to solve, into conflict being good, this is what we grow through. This is how we evolve and improve ourselves and our community. So it's all about, tools and processes for how to do that. That was great. I really, really enjoyed that. And at the cusp of creating that, one of my friends was coming to me and talking about this peer-to-peer food platform. Grow food, not lawns, cook food out of your house, sell it to your neighbors on a platform that's, subsidizing this. That's fantastic. We need local food. A huge passion of mine is plants and plant communication, but mostly is the relationship with food that's grown in our community. Preferably it's relationship with food that's, you have a personal relationship with, you're growing it, you're touching it, the oils on your fingers and feet are actually going into the soil, so the plant can get an understanding of who you are and then create food for you, because that's what plants want to do, to spread their, anyway. I love food. That's what I was getting at there. And I think we needed to localize it. So he came to me, he's like, hey, I know you're into crypto. I know you're organizing these things. What do we build a cryptocurrency for local food? So that was where the original idea kind of came from, is how do we make local food better, faster, and cheaper? So we can imagine, what happens if the Federal Reserve, which has created an enormous amount of money recently, what if that money went to subsidized local food systems? Right now it's subsidizing, big timber and big oil and all these industries that are literally destroying our planet, making things that would typically be unprofitable in capitalism, like timber industries lose money across the board, but they're only maintained because central banks or governments are flooding them with money. So what if we rewired that? What if we created our own financial system and we subsidize local food like we ought to be? We can make a platform that actually pays you to use it. And then we can start making, local, healthier food, the most cheapest food, because it ought to be anyway. It's been, transported the least distance. From all economic perspectives, it should be cheaper. So anyway, that's the kind of where Seeds started for me. Is I joined this from the perspective of how to create a new financial system that could serve a local food system. And as we started going through the financial and economic components of that, we realized actually this works for anything. It doesn't have to just be for food. This could actually be a platform to underpin a different type of civilization, which was really mind-boggling to us at the time. We started off like, let's fix the local food system. And then it was like, oh wait, actually, I think we could fix large parts of the economy. And as we got into that, we're like, well, we're actually gonna have to figure out how to govern this thing. So that's where Seeds started to come up and be like, okay, how do we deal with the centralized governance? What components are gonna plug into this to make sure that the people who are using the platform are the ones governing it, so that the currency is really the people's currency. Then the next question that came after that was, how do we organize ourselves? So we're some group of people building this code that exists nowhere. We have no legal entity. We're kind of just paying each other or volunteering our time, so we don't have a bank account. So it's like, how do we structure ourselves? And this is where Hypha was originally born, is we needed a different type of organism for giving rise to Seeds. And originally we actually thought we were just going to get rid of Hypha. We were going to set it up, organize until Seeds was launched and then dissolve and kind of disappear. But then as we started building Hypha and started building these really cool tools for us to organize ourselves and govern our community, we realized these were really useful tools, which is actually answering some of your questions here, because Hypha is the tool set for governing locally. I don't think Seeds is going to be really useful for local governance. Seeds is more of a global perspective. And when you're doing governance globally, there's a completely different way that's optimal for doing a global governance system than it is for a local governance system. So I don't think we need to look at Seeds as how do we rework this to work for local governance. We look at something like the Hypha tool set to plug into Seeds to do local, regional, inter-community, inter-village governance, that sort of thing. Yeah, and that was about 4 years ago where we set up Hypha, and we just growing into this really, really chaotic, fast-growing, impossible to maintain everything that's happening in an ecosystem. For a while, I was playing this role called map makers, which is why you see my face kind of everywhere. My role was to kind of get a grasp of what was happening in this ecosystem and, put words and pictures and phrases to it and try to explain this new landscape that's emerging. So that's what I've been doing for the better part of, 3 and something years now. And there's so many different ways I want to go. Ultimately, I'll sum this up because I want to get to questions because these are awesome. The thing that continues to drive me is I care most about this renaissance. I care most about the best way to build a different civilization. And seeds to me just looks like one pathway to really get us there, to provide a different foundation. So what I really love putting out there is I think there's a lot of other groups out there, a lot of other organizations that, we know that we need to collaborate. We know that the key to this success of this movement is actually working together, plugging all the pieces together to move as a whole unit. But I think that's actually our biggest hurdle right now is our old systems we're leaving behind. They teach the exact opposite. They teach how to be independent and how to compete and how to be number one. And I kind of like with that as the progression of a human. A baby starts off fully dependent on the mother, and then it grows to be independent, and then you have that terrible stage. And then some humans grow to be interdependent. So it's the stage beyond independent, where we are independent beings, but we choose to be in co-creation and connection with, the rest of life. And I think that's kind of what humanity is going through right now, is this phase where we're leaving the independent phase of capitalism and, nuclear family units is the most connection we see, into there's a lot of different paths that this interconnected being can go, and I'm not going to lie to you and pretend like I have a full picture of what it looks like. But one image is more like neurons in our brain, how they come up with a very clear way to send signals to each other to build more complex images to execute, so in a larger vision. Or you can look at bees in a honey hive doing a similar thing. And I think that's the tools we're trying to build here, is like, how do we do, collective, decentralized, scalable governance? Like, what does it look like if you could get 100 million people to align and cohere around a common goal that could be infinitely transformative? So that's, what really excites me about this is this new metahuman that we're creating right now. I think a lot of the last couple centuries have been building all these pieces that don't necessarily make sense, just like a baby in a womb. I mean, actually, I love this analogy is you could look at humanity right now. If you actually look at the total growth of humanity and the growth velocity of the total population of humans, it matches perfectly over that of the growth velocity and the total size of a baby in a womb. It's kind of eerie and I love it. It's always about, as above, so below. But I think we're following a very similar pattern where humanity is growing into this metahuman. And we've been building all of these structures that look kind of cancerous. And watching a baby grow inside a mother's womb without the full understanding of what's going on there, it looks like a cancer. It's sucking all of these resources, it's growing exponentially. We might look at that and be like, oh my gosh, we got to take that tumor out of you. It's going to kill you, But just at the moment where you feel like it's going to burst and everything's going to collapse and the host is going to die, that's when the birth phase starts. And I think that's what we're just really getting into the pinnacle of now. And then we're realizing the point of all these tools and systems we've been building for the last 1,000 years or however long. The baby didn't understand what the lungs were for because there wasn't air to breathe. Didn't know why it had legs. There was nowhere to walk. So I think that's similar to what we're building with I've taken this one far enough, so I'll leave it here. This is what drives me. Well, what I'm really most interested in is this evolutionary shift that humanity is going through. What pieces I can best continue to play at, and it's a question I'm always asking. So for example, I've helped set up Haifa, I've helped set up Seeds, and now I'm helping set up Renaissance Explorers. And I feel like that's probably going to be my role, is just helping set up different organs that this ecosystem needs, not being really attached to any one of them, but helping them all kind of connect, building the different pieces that we need, and really just showing up wherever I think I could be of most help and service to what's going on here. So if you have anything like that for me, feel free to reach out. All right, I'll leave it there. And I want to get into some of these questions because they're awesome. How does the governance system of Seeds work concretely, and how easy is it to use as a governance tool for local communities? Not easy at all for local communities. So again, that's kind of what the Haifa tool set's for. I'm going to show that off to you guys just real quick, in case you guys haven't seen it. If you can allow me to share my screen. Yeah, but I see seeds as more, it's a decentralized central banking system. It's an economic system. And really very few decisions, I believe, should go through seeds. We want to probably have 90% of the decisions we're making within this new ecosystem ought to be local or within your own organizations that are serving the bigger whole. For example, Haifa has been getting paid by seeds to do all of this stuff. So everything that's happening in Haifa, all the different proposals that Haifa is going through, all the different roles that are held there, that's not having to go through all the citizens of seeds. They're not needing to vote on that. The only thing they vote on is, do we pay Haifa more value to do what they're doing? And we want that to be kind of the general question across the board, is that all the citizens of seeds, they're voting on which organizations get a percentage of the overall seeds budget. So then any person out there, any group out there rather, could set up an organization of their own and then petition the citizens of seeds for a share of the collective budget to do things. And it could be anything that this movement needs, as long as the citizens find it valuable and give you a share of the budget, great. So then that's what we'd look like, is then the citizens are processing maybe 30 to 50 organizations, probably maximum, I would imagine. And that's the most that we're asking citizens to do. So it might be like a couple new organizations joining. And then those 30 to 50 organizations might represent local communities or region. Actually, sorry, those 30 to 50 won't. Those 30 to 50 would represent different functions for the seeds ecosystem, like movement building or the university place. So that's what Renaissance Explorers is about. It's a learning hub to understand the game and to create content to help others understand the game. It's like a new form of a university without necessarily the lecture-lectee relationship where it's a student-teacher, but it's more of a, we're co-learning together and it's a space to do that. So then the citizens could be like, yeah, let's fund Renaissance University. Let's fund Haifa because they're building the technology. Let's fund Samara because they're helping do movement building, et cetera, et cetera. Following the same theme, we have regions within seeds. So every region in the world, and a region is defined as just having 144 citizens say, yep, I'm part of that region. So groups might decide to do it by bioregion and say, hey, we have the Cascadia bioregion, or it might be a neighborhood, or it might actually be a traveling band of gypsies that created a region and they're just going around and it's not actually based on land, it's based on community. The only limitation there is that 144 citizens need to show up and say, yep, we're part of that region. And then when you are, you have a share of the budget that goes to regions. So it's about some percentage of the total harvest is going to go to all of the regions within seeds. And then a region could be operating within a do, which is what I'm going to show you right here.
Can you share screen now?
I've enabled it now. You can share your screen.
Yeah. Share it here. And then we can use the do for doing regional governance. So regions could have their different roles. You might have, the regional permaculturist who the community just pays.
Rieki, we lost you in the meantime.
Your sound is gone, Reiki.
Weird.
Now you're back.
Hear me again?
Yes.
I'm not going to share that then. That's unfortunate, but I'm going to share a link real quick and then you can just explore the DAO on your own. Where are we at with the DAO? So for the last, I think 2 years is when we launched version 1. We've been building in it, adding more tools, getting it ready so that when other groups use it, they're just not super frustrated and asking for new tools. And we're to that point now, and we're about 1-2 months, I'd say maximum, before other groups could then easily walk in and have a widget to set up their own local communities or regional communities or villages. So that's the 3 contexts we're going to have for the do to begin with. Maybe we discover more. Is organizations, so like Haifa, Samara, etc. So they're coming around with a shared purpose of accomplishing some task. So it's, either building technology or doing movement building or whatever. And then we have villages, which are, eco-villages, retreats, intentional communities. This is where the shared purpose is living together, creating a life together, meeting our needs in a more effective way, which is what I love about villages is instead of an organization where the purpose is to make money to then indirectly meet our needs so that we can buy things, a village's purpose is to meet our needs. So it might make sense to do something to make money and buy food, or it might make more sense to grow our own food directly. It might make sense for us to make money to entertain ourselves, or it might make more sense to create our own forms of entertainment within the community, etc. So it's just it's a context for groups of people to come together to say, how do we share resources and govern together? So it's a village. Villages will have really strong boundaries, as every type of eco-village ought to. So they have you can't just join a village. You have some type of membership process, which is going to be unique to every village. And that's what's different between a village and a region. A region, there is no boundaries and there's no one to say you can or can't join a region. So a region is very flexible and open. If it's the Cascadia region, you can just choose to join that if you live in Cascadia. If it's the Bali region, when I move here, I could just join it right away. So that's the 3 different contexts that would be using the do to do localized governance. And then what's really nice is then every do gets to start doing their own type of governance. So it gets to start changing things. If it doesn't like one token, one vote, like it is in Haifa, where Haifa issues voice tokens so that it's not an oligarchy where it's the equity token that's making all the decisions. It's a separate token that can be earned a myriad of different ways. We decided to do that because we feel like that's actually more fair because people are showing up at different capacities. Where one person, one vote isn't necessarily fair because someone who's, part of Haifa for, they did one quest one time versus someone whose entire livelihood is dependent on that, they have a different amount at risk and at stake. So they ought to have a different level of voice. In our opinion, that's what makes things fair. But regions might be different because a region is you're either in or you're out. So they might say, hey, we don't want to do the voice token model. We want to do one person, one vote. And each region can kind of decide their own. And this is what's really beautiful about this system is that in Cascadia, there might be 3 Cascadia regions that are kind of competing, but what they're offering is different forms of governance, different ways of making decisions, different cultures, different communities, different groups of people, whatever it is. And now we're just providing that diversity for folks. So we're not saying because you're in Cascadia, you have to collaborate and cooperate with these people and you're stuck with that. You get to say you have a diversity of options. And if none of them fit your needs, then you can actually start a new one. All you've got to do is convince 144 others to join you and you're active, So I might have answered that one a lot longer than you were looking for, but does that kind of help? Last piece, within a do, dues can make up all sorts of different ways to distribute value to. So we're launching the gratitude token that works across all seeds. But we're relaunching that to work within dues as well. So that every time you send gratitude, if you're sending it to someone else in your do, you're also going to send some do form of gratitude, as well as if you're just doing it in seeds. Some of you might not know what gratitude is. So a little segue on that, because that's also really important. Seeds as a currency that looks like a fiat currency, kind of acts similar to the US dollar. That's, to me, a little bit boring. We did it that way because it's really easy for people to come into this new system because it's familiar and we know how to engage with it. But I think we can do a lot more interesting ways to coordinate, which is ultimately what this is about. How do we coordinate at scale? That's ultimately what money is about. It's just how to coordinate. So there could be better ways of coordinating, and gratitude is one of our first experiments at doing with that. And what that looks like is at the start of every new moon, everyone gets these 200 gratitude tokens. They don't mean anything when you hold on to them. They only mean something once you send them to somebody else. And we just have a quick way of doing that. We just click acknowledge and it sends 20 gratitude to somebody else. So what this looks like is then anyone can just show up, do something that other members of the community find value in, and then they just signal it back out with gratitude saying, thanks for doing that. And now we've also created as a way that everyone has some value to give to somebody else, and it doesn't take any value from you to acknowledge somebody else. So this meets a lot of, weird stuff in our culture. For example, a lot of healers, artists, people who they're giving from their heart. A lot of them have this hard time charging for that. It feels kind of dirty or wrong. So capitalism kind of came up with a solution and said, we're going to launch courses to teach you how to refigure your relationship with money, and you're worth it, and you can charge people and feel like you're valuable. And, it's a little bit weird. So what we did is we said, let's change us to meet our monetary system rather than let's change our monetary system to meet us. So that's kind of what gratitude is about. Is it's something that you can give to somebody else to recognize that art or that healing that they gave you. And it doesn't take anything from you. And it's a pleasure to give to somebody else, just like a real hug. So that starts looking like hive intelligence, because what's really nice is everyone becomes a signaling agent. So someone can come in at the edge of the system, do something, and nobody else needs to know about it. Only those 10 people that saw that contribution could then signal it with gratitude, and they can end up getting paid for that contribution. I can give you a lot more examples, but I'll leave it at that. So that's just two different ways of just rethinking how we do, value distribution and governance on a local level.
To carry on the plan. So,
is that somebody with a question or just a mic on?
Just mic's on. People are arriving still.
Cool. So did that answer the question? How does the governance system of seeds work concretely? I don't think I actually got into the governance system. It didn't, now that I'm thinking about it. The governance system of seeds, we're doing three basic things right now. We're doing referendums, which is to make foundational agreements. So we just passed the Constitution. And then if we want to change the Constitution at all, that will also be a referendum. So that looks like anyone can come and join seeds and look at the Constitution and be like, hey, this paragraph's missing. Put up a proposal and say, we feel like this clause is really important. It's not there. Does the rest of the citizens feel like this is important? And then we can continue to evolve our Constitution dynamically as more wisdom comes to the table. So that's one thing we're doing seeds-wide. The second thing that we're doing is campaigns. So campaigns were always decided as, let's start off our economy with a gift economy where everyone gets welcomed in with a gift of seeds for doing something beautiful to serve this renaissance. So ideas like go out and plant a tree and get paid $100 in seeds for doing it, or attend tools for regenerative renaissance and get paid for learning about all these tools and systems, or go and do a beautiful deed, or go sit and meditate with nature and write a poem about it. There's so many different beautiful things that we could say, hey, this would be fun to run a campaign for, and we want to invite a bunch of people and give them a gift of seeds and welcome them into the system. So that's what campaigns are. A lot of folks are using it as a funding mechanism where they're coming and saying, hey, we have a project and we would like funding for it. In my opinion, that's not necessarily what seeds is for. But what's so beautiful is my opinion doesn't really matter. And the citizens have been funding a lot of stuff like that anyway. So, I keep voting them down and some of them keep passing, and hey, that's how this works, which is really cool. The last thing that we're doing is, second to last rather, funding alliances. So that's groups that have already been out there, working to serve this renaissance. And this is what I started this call off about, is like collaboration. How do we actually plug together? Which is everything that seeds and HIFA are focused on. And that's actually why we call it HIFA, segue again, is HIFA is the little hairs at the mycelial network that connect to healthy ecosystem. So the whole concept behind HIFA and what we're trying to build is tools that help a healthy ecosystem interact. We're not going to be the ecosystem, we're just trying to provide a communication and nutrient network for that ecosystem. So that looks like governance and economic tools. So what the alliances is all about is other organizations that are already serving this movement, let's give them a gift of seeds so that they now have a stake in this new system. So as seeds grows, their value that they're holding grows with it. So we can start working as a whole movement that way and benefiting for it. I mean, Bitcoin demonstrated something incredible. One, it demonstrated that it could coordinate using decentralized game theory, mechanisms to utilize 0.1% of all electricity on Earth generated. That's like completely mind-boggling. So incredibly unsustainable, but it demonstrated that we can build this decentralized ecosystem and do incredible stuff with it. Incredible being, for better or for worse, right? Which is what I think blockchain is. It's, the revolution, which is kind of for the worse, so the renaissance for the better. So that's where alliances come in, is how do we actually start operating as a whole ecosystem and grow a lot of value together. Bitcoin, distributed about $1 trillion worth of value at one point. So if we grow to a fraction of the size of Bitcoin, what could we do redistributing a few $1 billion? We could fund a lot of villages. We can set a lot of local food systems with that value, right? And I think we can get a lot more traction than Bitcoin did because we don't have a lot of the same fallbacks that Bitcoin has. Doesn't matter. Last thing that we're doing is we're voting on milestones. So up until now, HIFA originally put up the milestones and said, hey, pay us for building seeds. We're contracting with you and we're going to keep building all these tools as long as you keep paying us. What happened recently is Haifa just put up a proposal for milestone 3, and it was voted down by the citizens. And this is also something that's just so cool, because the citizens were looking at it and saying, actually, Haifa didn't do all the work this milestone. There's other organizations that have been helping. So we don't actually think it's fair that Haifa gets all of this. And it wasn't clear entirely what the citizens were agreeing to with Haifa's proposal. So this is another one of those instances where, the citizens are actually standing up and saying like, hey, this isn't serving us. So we're going to vote this down. So we're having those conversations right now about what does milestone 3 consist of, what other organizations are part of it, and let's get them funding for helping get us to this point. And yeah, so we're about to put up a new milestone 3 proposal. So that's kind of like the edge of where we're at right now. So I think that'll be really cool, is any other organization that's like, yep, we want to be a part of Seeds, we want to do storytelling, we're a collective of 5 people, we want to set up and get going, then you can actually help us reach some of our milestones and get paid by the Seeds ecosystem for doing that, which could be pretty cool. Yeah, so that's the 4 different contexts of what we're kind of governing right now. Was that helpful? I know I covered quite a bit and I was kind of all over the place, but felt like it was a good train. How do I persuade friends that Seeds is, as I believe, the real deal for regenerative change, not just another crypto grift with good PR greenwashing? Don't. I wouldn't try to persuade anyone. There's so many folks that are showing up because they feel this call to show up here. My main focus is just making a beautiful, it's like the way of going about permaculture. You make really healthy soil, you're gonna grow really healthy plants, and you don't really have to spend a lot of energy trying to tend plants. So, the persuading others is kind of like, buying plants from the store and sticking them in your soil and saying, grow here because it's really good for you. I think an approach where we just make really healthy soil and we nurture it and we just keep following what we're doing, folks will show up. And I think the energy that's spent trying to persuade people is much more healthy being spent, making community with the folks that are showing up right now. So I'd say don't persuade anyone, but if you wanted to, then I'd say just speak from your heart. I don't know. If you're looking for an answer where I try to like give you all the reasons why I think this is legit, I'm not going to do that. So, I'll pass on that one. I don't think we have good PR, by the way. We haven't really done much with that. So I say weird things on recordings and no one ever edits out. What's up with that? How do you see your personal role in Seeds in the future? What is your wishful reality? Yeah, I have no idea what the future consists of. I gave thinking that up, a few years ago, and I'm glad I did, because every year it gets way weirder than I ever could have thought. So my role is going to continue to be showing up however I feel is the most helpful place for me to show up. Some things I'm really excited about, which is worth talking about, is the village in a box. So setting up the do specifically for helping villages. And that's more than just providing them with the governance and organization and a new way of creating tokens. It needs to be integrated with helping folks go through the process of creating community. So how do we make decisions together? How do we deal with conflicts, like what I was bringing up at the beginning of this? So many things that stop communities from being able to progress or take years and years, and then it gets annoying and then they kind of just fizzle out because there's not really a clear process to go through to create one of these things. Just like any game, any new game you want to play, you open it up, there's a set of rules, you all read the rules, you all agree how to play, and then you start playing. And what this game is it can provide that basic set of rules, saying like, here's some best practices for how to do things, and just say, this is how it is. And then a community gets started, and then they start changing the rules as they go. And we find that it helps, speed up the process infinitely faster, because it doesn't take, 3 years just to get started. You get started, and then you use the game itself to continue to evolve the game, because that's how the game's designed, right? The game in this case is setting up villages. That's really near and dear for me in a very personal way, because that's what my daughter wants, and that's what I want for her, is to grow up in a village. And by village, to me, we're growing our own food, we're connecting with our community. And it's not just, me and my wife homeschooling. We have a whole bunch of other kids that she can grow up with and other parents to call hers. So that's a really exciting piece for me. And I think the tools are just about there. So after Renaissance Explorers, which is that's the second thing I'm going to be focused on a lot, is the decentralizing the knowledge of this game. So I'm holding some pieces, a lot of other folks are holding pieces. So Renaissance Explorers is this container to actually capture that, share all the knowledge that we have so far, so that there's a whole group of people that are then evolving what Seeds looks like. And we're actually going through that process right now to go through the entire game guide and evolve it collectively. So go through each one of the pieces, the organization, the economic system, the financial system, the governance system, and kind of go through and say, look, campaigns aren't working the way we want them to. And that's a really alive issue right now. Is a lot of community members think there's a better way to do governance. Awesome. So we're going to go through, we're going to run some experiments. We're going to help people understand the point of governance. So we're coming to the same level of awareness of what we're trying to accomplish, and then make proposals together about how to change that space or change the protocols. So that's my two main themes that I'm focused on right now. It's getting the Renaissance Explorers up and then getting villages kind of up and going. Last piece, I lied. There's this awesome opportunity, Haifa and the Ministry of Agriculture in Peru. They just gave Haifa a grant to build dues for their local farmer cooperatives, doing cacao and coffee and trying to do agroforestry systems. So we want to go there and share with them these tools to be able to build value together, help capture their story, because a lot of them are doing it regeneratively. And they want to be able to capture that story, put it into a QR, and be able to provably verify that this did come from a regenerative, grower, and it's not just a label that's being slapped on something. Why am I telling you this? Because it's, coming back to where we started. It's building tools for the local food system. So we're partnering with a couple other organizations to provide basically a farmer's market in a box, so that local farmers can come on, start selling their produce directly, and start doing it all using seeds and not paying any fees, and better than free and all that fun stuff. That's the other reason why I kind of had a breakdown lately, is because I'm holding a little bit too many threads. So I was going to keep going off about all the things I'm doing, but I'll stop there. So that's my personal role in Seeds in the Future, is kind of holding on to the threads that make the most sense and keep going from there. It's weird that was so high rated that people want to know what I'm up to. Next one, does Seeds have a mechanism that addresses dollar inflation in order to stabilize value, or it will be pegged to the dollar and subject to its inflation? Cool. So whenever anyone says stable, the next question you got to ask is stable to what? So when people say it's a stable coin, but it's stable to the US dollar, well, the US dollar is losing value. So it might be stable to the dollar, but it's not holding its value, its purchasing power, right? So how does Seeds work? Yep, you're gonna get the right answer. Hold on, let me pull up a graphic that'll tell you the best. As it's pulling up, I'll keep talking. Basically how it works is it's tracking the demand for seeds, and it's growing or subtracting the supply in order to meet changes in demand. And that's the basic economics of how we come up with the value of something. Supply meets demand. So if supply and demand are harmonious, then the value, the purchasing power within that economy is going to be more stable. So it's probably never going to be stable to the US dollar, even after go live. Right now, Seeds isn't meant to be stable. Seeds is meant to appreciate in value. It's a fixed supply currency, which means we're not growing any new tokens. That all happens after this go live period, which is what I'm going to bring up some slides to show you after it loads. Yeah, so right now, and go live's not going to happen until Seeds hits a price of at least 80 cents, between about $1.30. And that's when the whole Seeds economy is worth, maybe 700 million to a maximum about, $1.5 billion or something like that. Why that is because we wanted to have a two-phase thing. Is people who are joining Seeds and really committing and contributing to time now, there's a lot of risk involved. Seeds might not become anything at all. That would be very sad and a little bit heartbreaking. And maybe that's not entirely true, because I think there's enough people that Seeds is going to be something. So I think we're beyond the point where it's not going to be anything at all, but how far we get is still totally up to us. But the reason I say that is there's still risk. So people who are showing up right now, like, there ought to still be some form of compensation for coming in at this stage and really taking the tedious work of bringing this into reality. So that's why Seeds are designed to go up in price. is that people can come in right now and actually see that price appreciation. And it's just the economic mechanism that helps get network effects. It worked tremendously for Bitcoin. People bought it just because, you know, dollar go up. And that's great. It redistributed a lot of value, and a lot of that value went to open source projects, and it's been financing all of these tools that are going to serve our renaissance. So I think that ultimately was, you know, a net positive for the world. And so seeds can have that same component. So when alliances are coming in and they're getting, you know, $10,000 worth of seeds at a penny, if we got up to $1, that 10,000 grant now looks like $1 million. Awesome. And that $1 million went to a tree planting organization. So now they can continue serving their mission better now than they were before. So anyway, that's the first phase, is where seeds gets to this go live point. Sorry, it's taken me so long to scroll to this because we need to put this in a different format. I think having the game guide all in one doc is probably overwhelming. So if some of you haven't seen this, it's 169 pages, but probably like 140 pages worth of, you know, protocols that really explains exactly how this whole system works. I promise you, we've been doing our best to make sure that we're only saying as much as we need to. So it, you know, hopefully is a really nice read. I'm going to share it in the chat now if anyone wants to dive into this. But it's the complete story. So if you want to know how all of this kind of works, how the tools work, kind of goes through all of that. Let me make this bigger. Awesome. So this is what I was looking for. So maybe there's a, no, there's not. So this is what seeds will look like after go live. You know, so we're stabilizing purchasing power. So we might be fluctuating around this, you know, a purchasing power stabilized value, whilst the US dollar you see in every central currency right now is losing a tremendous amount of value. Artificially scarce assets like the crypto market, you know, is going to continue to be volatile. There's this weird belief that a fixed supply currency could ever be price stable if there's more people demanding use of it. So the irony with Bitcoin is it'll never be price stable until it's reached maximum adoption. But maximum adoption could never come unless it was price stable, because then no one could use it for the currency, which would give it its maximum adoption. So it's kind of got this chicken and egg problem. And why I think that is because every system ought to evolve. You know, the protocols that govern the growth of a baby are different from the protocols that govern the growth of an adult. You know, baby, you're growing exponentially. When you're adult, you stop growing. So at different phases of the life, you need to have different protocols that govern it. So I think different crypto economic systems that don't, you know, have a period where they functionally change how they're acting and behaving at different cycles of its life, I don't think those are optimal systems. What I mean by that is having this bootstrapping phase where it's getting adoption because the price is going up. And what we're looking for that go live to happen is for the economy to be large enough that people can actually use seeds to buy things. You know, a lot of people come in right now and they're like, hey, what can I buy with seeds? You say it's a currency, but I can't buy anything. It's like, well, that's not the point. It's, again, one of these chicken and egg things. We need to have enough people on board in order for you to use it as a currency. So using it as a currency isn't really the optimal strategy right now, because that means you're spending it. So from every economic perspective, the optimal strategy is just earn some seeds for doing good deeds and then sit on them and wait until, you know, go live. Or even better, help us get to go live by making sure enough organizations are on board. Within your community, there's enough groups on board that are going to start accepting seeds. So that's actually what we're looking for go live to ever happen, is do we have the economy large enough to sustain actually using this currency to meet our needs? And we won't flip that switch for go live until we hit that point. And then after we do, that's when it becomes a better than free currency. And that's when the harvest starts. So as, you know, demand is fluctuating and we need to create more seeds, that's what's funding this harvest that's then paying all the regions and the people and the organizations that are helping seeds grow. And that's why seeds becomes a better than free currency, is instead of the Federal Reserve them just making a bunch of money and giving it to defense contractors and whatnot, if we make more money as our decentralized bank rather, that money goes out to all of the people that are part of the network helping it grow. So there's no fees to use it, and you also get paid for participating, and that's where the whole kind of better than free piece comes in. There's probably a longer answer than you guys are looking for, but that's kind of how I answer things. So stop there. All right, next question. You mentioned the biggest challenge as community collaboration and creativity. How can we design products and initiatives for these? What have you learned so far? Okay, so for about 2.5 years now, I've been working on this episode that I was going to get out 2.5 years ago, and I keep thinking I'm going to be finished with it. And it's called Regenerative Organizing. At first, it was one 30-minute episode, and now it's broken into about 3 45-minute to an hour episodes. So that's the only way I can answer this question about what we've learned with organizing so far. It's actually quite a bit, and it's really context specific. So, all of the best strategies for organizing globally is way different than organizing locally, is way different depending on if it's within a region or if it's within an organization or if you're doing stuff within a circle. I mean, there's so many, it's holons within holons of different contexts of governance. So it's the biggest piece. I mean, all of this is about collaboration. How do we collaborate better? And better is a lot of things. It's how do we meet our goals easier and how do we make it more joyful? And I think that's something that's really worth exploring is how do we make collaborating together fun and engaging and rewarding? And there's a lot of room to explore there. So, the tools that the Do will provide is, you get to create new types of tokens. You can create new types of contracts. By contracts, you could say, doesn't matter, or you can create new types of badges. And all of these things come together to give a basic building blocks for us to start redesigning, how we want to distribute value and coordinate within groups. So I think once we launch the Do and we actually start getting going with a lot of different experiments, then we're just gonna, turn up the heat, so to speak, on all of the experiments and learn a lot more. Which is why I'm hesitant to ever put anything out, is because it's changing so fast and I'm constantly updating it, and something I thought was true becomes no longer true. And that's kind of the problem with this whole space right now, is it's really, really chaotic and growing incredibly fast. So it is kind of, fully time consuming that way. So yeah, unfortunately, I can't give you any canned answers that are going to be helpful there. But I'm working on those episodes, and then I'll share them if you want a full answer to that.
There's a question about the Ambassador Academy. Maybe I can speak to that. There's a cohort just starting at the moment, and I think you guys can still join. And if not, then the next one will be in October. So if you still want to jump on board and do the Academy as part of the course, I'd say just start it, try to do it now, because October will be too late to fulfill the course requirements. So I'd suggest those people who are interested go on Discord, and there's a channel called Ambassadors General where you can put in your interests, say that you're interested in joining, and those people who are facilitating these sessions will help you further. Someone's saying it's oversubscribed. That might be it. Yeah, I heard that the last cohort was really big, like much larger than previous ones. But
And something else that we're working on launching now is the Ambassador Academy. We can get a lot of attention as a go-to place to deep dive and learn about seeds. But something we're going to be launching is the Game of Seeds, which is this open platform for anyone to make different episodes sharing about. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But that's going to walk you through a process of understanding the system a lot better. So there's a lot of individual articles and videos and different quests. Ultimately, we want the Game of Seeds to kind of be Jumanji meets Regeneration. So you could be out and you get this like buzz, and it's like, hey, you have 36 hours to complete this quest. And it's like, ooh, what is it? And it's like, hey, you've got to run to this place and figure out a riddle. And then you meet up with 3 people and you plant a tree, and then the 3 of you earn like $50 worth of seeds for doing that. So anyway, that's what we think would be a lot of fun, is we can just start, creating quests to go out there and actively build this new world we're working on building, and distribute seeds that way, which answers this next question: how to contribute the seeds if I myself don't have a lot of money to invest. Yeah, so investing is probably one of the lowest forms of contribution. I think it's great, and for people who are really time poor and asset rich, they invest, and we have, unfortunately, like more large investors than a whole bunch of small ones, which I think would be optimal, but it's just how these things work. If you don't have a lot to invest, that's perfectly fine. It's show up and contribute. So we're running Gratitude right now, and Gratitude's getting funded every cycle, and want to start increasing the funding. So just showing up in Discord, and if anyone says, acknowledge you and sends you some gratitude for doing anything that, people find valuable, you could start earning seeds that way. Or doing any of the active quests that are out there, or when the game of seeds starts, to start doing game of seeds as well and learning about it, participating. So that's all ways to earn seeds rather than having to buy them. The second way is, depending on how deep you want to go, there's a lot of spaces setting up where you can join an organization, potentially even get a role and get paid. Everyone in this movement right now, there's 30 people or so in Haifa that are paid, 3/4 to full time to be building this thing. And as we continue to grow, we're going to be able to bring more and more folks in who can be paid, half to full time to build the Renaissance and grow this movement and serve this transition. So there's a lot of organizations that are getting started, and certainly in about 2 months' time, when the DO opens up for other organizations to start, there's going to be a lot more opportunities for you to show up to, whatever DO fits your skill set. If you're a storyteller or if you're a developer or whatever, to show up and do some quests, contribute to those organizations, get paid for doing it, and participate that way. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways for you to contribute, even so much as inviting folks. So that's another thing, is that you only have to send 5 seeds, help them go through the process of becoming a citizen, and you can earn, it drops down as we invite, but I think right now the reward is around 1,200 seeds, which I think is still pretty substantial. So even something as part as just being an ambassador, helping people understand it as they show up, walking them through the process of learning about this and becoming a citizen, that could, earn you a lot of seeds as well. So yeah, that was the original intention here, and why we've capped buying seeds and why we haven't taken any VC money or big investors. Seeds was always meant to be something that was spread wide and far. It's not something to just reconcentrate wealth. It's a mechanism designed to kind of spread wealth and finance this movement. So anyway, long story short, if you don't have a lot of money to invest, don't. Earn seeds, hold on to them, let them appreciate and value, and build value that way. Because the main thing that seeds is intended to do is redistribute wealth to this movement. So that's all the folks that don't have wealth right now. Well, we should. Let's build our own economic system that says that we do, and then we can. Yeah. What time is this over? Is this the end of the session, or there's a couple more questions that are here? Good. So how do you guys want to move forward?
Well, we scheduled it for an hour, but I'd say maybe we can do 2 more questions.
Maybe those who sit in the question could ask it and then make a bit more of those last 2.
Because your audio is quite loud. I didn't quite catch what you suggested.
Is there a resource which shows which organizations, businesses are already participating in seeds so that we could support them or suggest others do? I think there's like 3 or 4 different fractured ones that I've seen. I'm not currently aware of one complete one, but I know of a couple folks that have talked about creating a complete one. So unfortunately, I don't have that. If anyone knows of those links, please share them here. And I'm going to share one more really helpful link that kind of is the go-to place for everything. It's called the Ecosystem Resources. And then there's links to a lot of different docs and articles and kind of everything in here. So if you feel like diving a little bit deeper, that links to anything you might need. But yeah, very recently, I've seen 2 people show up talking about a map, saying they have the skills to build it, and talking about banking one. So I think we're just in the process of actually collating and bringing all the organizations that are currently here and sharing that. How do organizations that are regenerative and not about growth and competition, but about understanding life and nature, reforestation can come in? Yeah, awesome. So like I said, the alliances are there for specifically those organizations. We've given seeds to several local food organizations, tree planting organizations, some other really cool ones. So any organization that's out there serving this regenerative renaissance, that's what the alliances are here for them to come in and get a share of this thing. And then participate however they want, because then that organization could earn even more seeds, or sending out invites to their community and bringing them in. Then that organization can earn those referrals. Also, we've run this a couple times. I think it's a really cool model. For example, Forest Without Frontiers, they ran a campaign to get liquid seeds. And then everyone who donated $20 worth of seeds to their tree forest planting, they got 20 pounds worth of seeds. So we were just subsidizing tree planting, which I think is really beautiful. It's kind of the jujitsu move in the economy. Right now, our global economic systems are subsidizing deforestation. So let's subsidize reforestation and kind of try to reverse that momentum. So I think organizations that are doing like a lot of good out in the world, but they're nonprofit and those resources go to planting trees or feeding hungry or serving something really beautiful. They can also run campaigns and run that model where we can subsidize people donating to them, which I think is a cool one. And then the other thing is wisdom. If other organizations are out there and they've done decentralized organizing, or if they know about regenerative metrics and different principles that could be brought into seeds that could help us, that's a big thing that could help as well. If you look at the game guide, there's a pretty big gap between what it is for a region to be regenerative. So we've kind of mapped out initial, mappings for what an organization can do to be regenerative, but we don't necessarily know it for regions. So it's another piece that's wide open for us to kind of co-create on is, how do we want to reward a region? What do we want a region to do? Do we want Cascadia to say, we're going to pay you more seeds if you're planting more trees, if you're demonstrating that you're, drawing down carbon, that your, quality of life index of the people that are part of your region goes up? Like, what do we want to track to say this is, contributing to our economy and to reward you with? So that's another huge design space is, helping actually design this system. So wisdom is another way that, organizations can show up. Finally, just using seeds as a method of payment. So if you just want to say, yep, we'll accept seeds, I think that's helpful. We'll do one more. I'm going to break this. I'm not going to read one of these. What I'm going to do is for the last one, someone who's got a burning question, or maybe two, if you've got a really strong desire to ask something right now, please unmute yourself and I'd love to answer that one. All right, then there is a question here, which is, if I want to have a permanent useful role within seeds or hypha and get paid for doing so, what's the best way of doing that? I'm going to send you the hypha handbook, which is, our best way of doing it within hypha. And there's some things to learn here that maybe it could be best ways of doing it within other organizations. Sorry for overwhelming you guys with a lot of documents today. But in short, the best way to show up is, one, figure out what your regenerative ikigai is. And we start off that way, which is, what's your purpose? What do you love doing and what does this Renaissance need? And then what could you get paid for doing? And trying to figure all of those things out. And that's what we call is, the regenerative ikigai. And that one requires, unfortunately, learning new skills about how to self-organize and do sense making. We're not typically taught that. We find that one of the biggest things we have to unlearn and relearn is folks showing up to say, like, okay, I'm here, I'm ready to play, someone tell me something to do. And that's awkward because most folks are allergic to that command and control hierarchy. So, there's not a lot of folks there to tell you what to do. So that, tends to cause a lot of conflict because people are like, hey, I'm here, I'm eager, but, I need to be told to do something. And there's no one on the other side of that that's willing to tell them to do something, right? So what it takes is to kind of show up, figure out where there's a gap. For example, someone came in and said, hey, is there a map? We said, no, there's not a map. They said, great, I would like to take on doing the map. Who else should I connect with to learn about doing a map? And then how it could look is he goes, good, you've been working on a map too. Let's talk together. They set up a call. The three of them are like, yes, we want to make a map. Let's take this and make it a proposal to hypha to pay us for making a map. So then they come to hypha and they say, hey, we want to put up a quest where he wants, $3,000, and the three of us are going to come together over the next couple of weeks and we're going to build a map showcasing all the organizations and projects within seeds. hypha members could be like, yep, we want that, that's useful, do that quest. And we want to start with everyone doing a quest where they say, hey, this is a gap that I see, I would like to build that and do that. go through the process of doing it, get paid, and then repeat that a couple more cycles, because that helps understand the flow of how this unfolds, which is really self-organizing, where you sense what needs to get done and then you go ahead and do it and then you get paid. After that flow kind of repeats, you get a hang of it, you really like it, then the next stage is coming in and doing an assignment. And what assignment means is that you're just holding a position and role, which might be, in this case, now that you've built the map, you're maintaining the map. So now you're at 10% of full time that you're taking to just maintain the map. And that could be a role that you might have indefinitely as the map maintainer role. So anyway, that's just one example of a process where people can come in and start contributing. Haifa is going to be really focused on tech. So if any developers are out there, if you want to build, if you want to help build the light wallet or the passport or the do-it-self, or we have decentralized exchanges that we've launched, a whole bunch of different tools. If this is something that you're excited about, most likely come to Haifa. Other organizations are going to be getting set up and are getting set up now, and some exist that are doing storytelling or movement building. And we're going to need organizations that are going to help people actually set up local pilots and understand seeds. So really the landscape is unlimited. You can come in, sense where you feel there's a gap, and then make an organization around it, petition to get funding and get going. Last example is this is what Samara did. There's a bunch of people that were coming here and saying, hey, we want to do movement building. We want to do it a different way because the way Haifa does governance and makes decisions, it's not quite how we want to do it. So we want to set up a different organization. So the 20 or so of them came together, made an incubation proposal to Haifa and asked Haifa to fund it to get set up. And then Haifa did that. And I think we paid them like $30,000, I think, to run their incubation quest to get set up and figure out what Samara is doing and start doing movement building. So it's a different landscape. It kind of requires a lot of action and a lot of self-governance and direction to show up and figure out what needs to get done. But then just asking that question, be like, yes, this is what I'd like to do. Who do I need to talk to? And just driving it forward is the best advice I can give right now. A big thing we're focused on is making that process as seamless as possible. And we're going to kind of shift our gears towards that come August, September, once the do is out there, of helping groups come into dues, organize, come up with their purpose, and then fit into the whole ecosystem, get funding and go. But if you're looking at coming in right now, then I suggest kind of following that previous suggestion.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot, Rieki. We're 11 minutes after the hour. It's time to round off. Thank you for coming and sharing your personal story and for the rich session. And thanks everyone for your questions. Maybe let's unmute ourselves and
thanks, Rieki. Thanks,
express
Anna,
our
for hosting.
gratitude.
Great job. See you soon.
Everyone.
Amazing, inspiring stuff.
Thanks, thank you.
Thank you very much, Rieki. Thanks a lot.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Nikki.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Does anyone want to stay behind for a...
I can stick around.
No, it's fine. A lot of people have gone now. I just wondering if you use the room. We could stop the recording.